It's time to present Scott DuPont to bring you another episode of Finance Your Movie with tips and strategies to help you get your money to tell your story. It's time!
Okay, I'm here with John Blair, the co-producer of Sound of the Surf this week. Welcome, John.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me here.
So, before we get started, I got to tell you, I got a little geeked out because I used to be a surfer in Florida. I would literally surf every single day, sometimes 12 hours a day. You couldn't pull me out of the ocean if there were swells. And I'm a little bit younger, I guess, because I didn't quite grow up with the Beach Boys. I love their music. I appreciate all that beach blanket bingo stuff. For me, during the 70s and 80s, it was more surf punks, surf Nazis, and stuff like that. But I really love the trailer. It was amazing. It's really a culture, right? I want to hear about. I'm going to shut up and find out how this movie got created.
Okay, well, the story is fairly simple. The director of this film, Tom Duncan, was good friends with a drummer named Dusty Watson, who played drums in my surf band from around 1979. And I mean, we were pretty active in the 80s and early 90s. Took a hiatus for a while and came back, and the band did several European tours. But anyway, Dusty was a drummer in my band, and Dusty and Tom went to high school together, so they were longtime friends. And Tom went to visit Dusty one day.
Southern California?
I'm sorry?
Southern California?
Yes, Southern California. They both live in Southern California. And Dusty told Tom, Tom had been making corporate videos for a while, so his forte was cinematography, but for private corporate interests primarily. And they're having a talk, and Dusty says, nobody's ever done a documentary on the real story of how surf music came about, and you should do something with that. So Tom started investigating it. Dusty told Tom, the guy you really need to talk to is John Blair. And Tom got a hold of me immediately, and we started discussing the story, which enamored Tom. He thought there was definitely a story there to tell. And he started getting this idea in his head of how to tell that story. So that's kind of how the germ idea started in Tom's head. And here we are, 18 years later after that little meeting with Dusty, and we have a movie.
Now, was that meeting a result of you working on something called Rock and Roll High School? It was a film or video years ago.
No, I don't think there was any connection. That Rock and Roll High School, we're not talking about the Ramones recording. We're talking about, I think, a YouTube video, ongoing video series of interviews, if you will. And the guy that did that just got a hold of me one day and wanted to talk to me. It's so long ago now, I don't remember exactly why. It probably was after we started working on the movie.
So my question is, what was so special or unique about John Blair where they contacted you? Because you hadn't produced a lot of films before this, I don't think.
Zero films, actually. I've been involved in surf music basically since the early 60s when I started learning how to play the guitar, and I had a couple of surf bands at the time. That evolved kind of into collecting records. I was very much into records my entire life, really. And I started seriously collecting records in the early 70s. And that led to my developing a pretty large collection of surf music from the 60s. And it occurred to me one day that nobody had ever done a discography of surf records from the early 1960s. And nobody had ever tried to quantify that amount of that volume of recordings that were released, of which there were considerably a lot of records. And I took it upon myself to basically quantify my collection. And I generated into a little book called The Illustrated Discography of Surf Music. And that was 1975. That followed a gentleman named Greg Shaw in LA who had a fanzine called Who Put the Bump. And he got a hold of me one day and asked me if I wanted to interview Dick Dale for an article in his fanzine. And of course, I jumped at that chance. So I did the interview with Dick, and we published it. He published it in Who Put the Bump. Then I did my discography, and realized that I sold quite a few copies of that little book, and I realized there was a fairly large audience for this music out there. So that led me to thinking about making a record, because it was something I wanted to do in the 60s, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have any experience in the studio. So flash forward to 1979. By then, I had done some limited recording in a studio, and I was kind of used to how all that worked. And so I put a little band together, and we went into a guy's home using a 4-track TX tape deck, and we recorded 4 tracks that I released on a 7-inch EP in 1979. And I just did, I don't know, 500 copies or so, just to get that out of my system. So by then, I had generated kind of a name for myself with the Bump article, the discography, and now I had this record. So Greg Shaw, again, got a hold of me after that record came out. He said, I heard this record, and nobody's doing anything like this in 1979. These were 4 surf instrumentals on this EP. And he said, if you're interested in continuing to do this, and you want to go into a studio and record a whole album of this music, I will release it. You don't say no to an offer like that when a record company says, if you just produce the tracks, I'll put it out. So again, I went back in the studio with these guys, and we recorded the album, which eventually came out in late 79. It was called Surf Beat 80. And that record pretty much put the band and me on the map.
Yeah, probably did well.
Well, it did pretty well. It did well enough to get a phone call 3 or 4 months after the record was in the stores from a promoter in Los Angeles who was planning a big surf music show at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, 3,000-seat Civic Auditorium. He said, we got Dick Dale and we got the Surf Punks, and would you guys like to open the show? I can only pay you $100, but would you like to open the show? Well, again, you don't say no to an offer like that, even if the pay was $100. So we did that show in front of a sold-out audience at the Santa Monica Civic, and
very cool.
That show has since become kind of the flashpoint for the surf music revival that happened in the early 1980s. And so again, my name's out there. I got a discography. I've got a record. I've got an album. We're starting to play shows. After that performance, the promoter is paying me and pulling off these $5 $20 bills. He's saying, I also book shows for nightclubs in Los Angeles. Would you guys be interested in playing at any of my nightclubs? So this was a series of offers that I could have said no anywhere along the way, but you don't, and something like that comes along. It kind of inflames your interest in getting out there and playing more of this music, which was an anachronism in 1980. Nobody was doing surf instrumentals in 1980. So all of a sudden, other bands started coming along playing the same sort of music, and the scene really grew from there. So
very cool.
There were a lot of other things that happened over the next decade that kept my name out there. But yeah, so I've just got a background in surf music research, discographies. I know a lot about the music. I've just been, it's been up to here in my head for all these years. So that's kind of how I got my name on the map.
All right. So
that's why Dusty said, talk to John. John knows the story.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about the budget. Obviously, this probably was not a low or micro budget because of all the licensing and all the old stock footage and all that stuff, which looks beautiful in the trailer, by the way. So what was the budget, and how did you raise all the money? How did this come together?
That's a pretty simple question to answer. The budget was somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So it was, for an independent production, it was a little costly. But Tom had a very high production values. He just did not want to scrimp on that. So the high production values, coupled with, yes, you mentioned the bad Grammy in the room, licensing all of this music. Are you familiar with Denny Tedesco's Wrecking Crew film?
No.
If you ever have a chance to see The Wrecking Crew, it's an excellent film that Denny did. And The Wrecking Crew, the studio musicians were involved in hundreds of hit records over the years. And all of that music, he had to include a lot of it in his film. It took him 20 years to finish that movie. And my understanding is that a lot of that time was spent licensing and generating funds to pay for the licensing to get the movie finished. And we faced exactly the same uphill battle with this movie. So yes, licensing all of this music cost a pretty penny. And
Did you just start calling music buddies or people you knew? Because I see a list of like 2 or 3 dozen producers on the film. Did you reward people with producer titles for putting in X amount of dollars?
that was the result of a crowdfunding campaign that Tom did a number of years ago. He promised us what's the word for it? Bonuses or whatever when you give money to a
Perks.
crowdfunding thing. If you give $5, you get something back. If you give $100, you get a little bit more back. And one of the benefits for giving him a certain amount of money was you get producer credits at the end of the film. So yeah, there's a number of producer credits in the film because a lot of those people gave us a good amount of money to help with the licensing costs. I think that crowdfunding campaign generated somewhere close to 40,000. I could be wrong, but I think that it was a successful campaign, and he reached his goal, and it helped us move forward on the film. Much to my chagrin, though, after Tom passed away in 2021, it took about 6 months for me to determine that most of the music at that point had not been licensed. So all of a sudden, it came up to me to get that taken care of. We actually hired a music licensing individual who helped us get all of that stuff. It took us about a year at that point, year and a half after Tom passed away, to get to the point where we were able to license all of the film. So all of the music in the film. So this was a complete out of the pocket expense. It's typical definition of an independent production. You don't have a lot of
Out of your pocket, or were you calling some other people to come in as well?
nope, out of my pocket, Tom's pocket, maybe 1 or 2 other people that are listed as producers in the credits gave us a fairly substantial amount of money, but it was all of that plus the crowdfunding campaign, and that's it. That's
Wow,
it.
a true passion project.
Yeah, so I'm heavily invested in the movie. Tom was heavily invested, much more than I have been. But yeah, it's basically the two of us in our pocketbooks. That
Well, you were the great distributor. By the way, I forgot to say a thank you to Andrea at Vision Films for connecting us. But you got a great distributor. I think there's a large audience, like people like myself that grew up with this music. I'm excited to see the movie when it comes out. And when will it come out, and where can people see it?
It's being released on DVD and on several pay-per-view streaming platforms, as I understand it, on July 1st. So by the time people hear this podcast, the DVD should be out there in all the places where you would go to buy DVDs. Vision has
Somebody.
been, I must say, Vision has been very, very helpful and pleasant to work with so far on this. They've been great. So I think they'll do a pretty good job promoting it and getting it out into the marketplace.
Yeah, what's interesting? I get challenged sometimes, like, oh, no one buys DVDs anymore, rents DVDs anymore. And I would agree, it's a shrinking market, absolutely. But I actually sell some DVDs every quarter still. And for this particular market and audience, I think Vision and probably yourself were savvy enough to realize that people over the age of 40 or 50, you don't want to have all your valuable treasures online at a whim of being uploaded or whatever. Like, I like owning certain types of media, so I never have to pay a subscription, or I never have to, pay $7.99 to watch it again a second time.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah.
And I think you'll do well with the DVD rollout. Um, so is there any kind of website to follow the film, or social media coordinates where people can follow you in the film?
Several places, actually. that people can go. Sound of the Surf has a website, number one, soundofthesurf.com. We also have a Facebook page that is updated fairly regularly. I think it's called Sound of the Surf, the movie, on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, of course. And there's another website that people can go to, not just for updates on this movie, but just for information about surf music in general. It's a forum online called surfguitar101.com. And it's free to join. It's free to read. And once in a while, when there's something big to announce about the movie, there will be a post. I will get a post on Surf Guitar 101. So that's another place for people to go to get information.
Awesome. John Blair, thank you so much. Make sure you go see Sound of the Surf, soundofthesurf.com. And it's long, long overdue. I'm glad that you were the one that finally released all this amazing music. I look
Well,
forward
it's
to
all
it.
Tom Duncan's film. It's really Tom Duncan's film. I simply was a sidekick for him, helped him get some interviews along the way, put money into the project, advised him on the storyline. But it's really Tom Duncan's film. I think he did a really, really good job with it. It took a long time to get it to the point where he was happy with it, but Tom was in control the whole time, and it's to his credit that we now have this movie coming out, and hopefully everyone will enjoy it. It's an interesting story.
Awesome. Thanks again, John.
You bet. Thank you.
It's time!
There's never been a better time to make your own film. And if you have a dream project you're excited about and 100% committed to getting it funded, go to financeyourmovie.com, click on the green telephone, you'll see our calendar and find an open spot. We'll do a one-on-one call, which will be the best hour you've ever spent getting clarity and strategy towards financing your movie.